Sherwin Bryce-Pease now to get a little bit more on this rolling story. Sherwin, America got its independence from the United Kingdom in 1776. But there's been a relationship between the two countries, and I would imagine that the Queen has had quite a role to play there.
Quite right, Peter. I'm certainly not able to give you the full history lesson of the relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States. But what I can tell you is that the late Queen Elizabeth II met every U.S. president, I believe, as far back as Harry Truman. Most recently, she met with Joe and Jill Biden on their latest visit to the United Kingdom. She has met with former President Donald Trump. I know she's met with the Clintons. She's met with the Obamas, I believe, as far back as 2011. The only statement that we didn't include in our preview piece there, Peter, was from President Clinton and Hillary Clinton on the passing of Her Majesty the Queen. Let me just read you a little bit about that. Hillary and I mourn the passing of Her Majesty. We join people across the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth and all around the world in giving thanks for her extraordinary life. Throughout her remarkable 70-year reign, she led Britain through great transformations with unfailing grace, dignity, and genuine care for the welfare of all its people. In sunshine or storm, she was a source of stability, serenity, and strength. And those are some of the adjectives, Peter, that you will continue to hear in the days ahead, leading up to the funeral in 10 days at Westminster Abbey, and one imagines beyond. Words such as duty, grace, dignity, stability, serenity, strength, comfort, and pride, dedication, funny, remarkable, devotion, stateswoman. And that's just from principles like former presidents here in the United States. One can just imagine what other people, more perhaps closer to home, are saying, but certainly words of admiration for the late monarch, Peter.
Do you have a sense at all about how Americans are reacting to the news? Many of them are actually English, living abroad, but you know, there's a picture of Meghan Markle as a teenager, 1996, outside Buckingham Palace, which perhaps talks to a lot of travel from America to Britain. And one of the things they want to see, of course, is changing of the guard, Buckingham Palace, all of that. So are there people in America who today are feeling sad?
Look, you're not going to see the teams of people that have gathered outside the gates of Buckingham Palace in Times Square today because of this passing. But there is certainly a great deal of affection between these two countries. These are one of the oldest geopolitical relations in the world. You heard from Karen Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, talking about how this is one of the most important alliances between these two countries. I believe the British, in the early days, burnt down the White House, so there's also that. So there is certainly a long-standing relationship between these two allies. You know, they sometimes go to war together, Peter, Iraq being one example, many other fora. So there is a long-standing relationship. So there's a great deal of empathy and condolence and sympathy that will emanate from the United States, but not, you know, the level of outpouring one might see in a former Commonwealth realm or a former or a current country that belongs to the Commonwealth. And certainly incomparable, I feel, to what one will see in terms of the outpouring of grief that will emanate across the United Kingdom and adjoining countries in Europe, Peter. What we do know, and we'd like to share this with some of our viewers, is what really happens now over the next 10 days. Let me give you a bit of a rundown. Flags, of course, at all the castles and palaces in the UK, and one imagines government buildings will now fly at half-mast. Tomorrow, let's call that day one, the proclamation of the new king, King Charles. You've been saying it's King Charles III. Will be read at St. James's Palace. Tributes will be paid in Parliament tomorrow. The coffin on day 2 will depart Balmoral and be taken by road to the Palace of Holyrood House. Day 3, King Charles, in one of his first acts of sovereign, will attend the Palace of Holyrood House for the ceremony of the keys and will have an audience with the Scotland's First Minister and receive a motion of condolence from the Scottish Parliament. On day 4, the coffin is expected to move to Edinburgh Waverley Station, from where it will travel by royal train to London. King Charles will fly to Northern Ireland to receive messages of condolence and attend a service of prayer and reflection on the life of the late Queen. On day 5, the coffin is expected to arrive at Buckingham Palace ahead of a big memorial planned in London for that day. The Queen's coffin will then be taken to Westminster Hall, where it will lie in state for 5 days leading up to that funeral. On day 6, the coffin continues to lie in state. Day 7, Peter, King Charles travels to Wales to attend service and receive a motion of condolence. On day 8, he will receive governors general and prime ministers from the realm. This is referring to areas essentially where the late monarch and now King Charles remains the head of state. So places like Jamaica, places like Canada, places like Australia. Governors general are the emissaries essentially of the Queen in those realms, in those locations. So they will travel back to the UK in terms of the protocol here. King Charles will then receive those governors and prime ministers. On day 9, King Charles will welcome foreign royal families and VIPs who are attending the funeral. They will then are expected to attend the lying in state at Westminster Hall. And then, of course, on day 10, state funeral at Westminster Abbey. And one probably hasn't seen anything like that since the passing of Princess Diana so many years ago, Peter. I don't think we can even compare it to the passing of Prince Philip in April last year, right? Because we were under COVID lockdowns. You'll remember that iconic figure of the Queen, that image of the Queen sitting by herself dressed in black, fully masked as she laid her late husband to rest and surviving him by just 17 months. Her passing September 8th, 2022. Philip died April 9th, 2021. She lived 17 months longer than her husband, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a state funeral of state funerals. We have to remember, because she lived so long, that there is no memory for many, many citizens across the world of the funeral of a monarch in the United Kingdom. 70-odd years on the throne. It's difficult to imagine for many Britons, actually, what life would be like without the Queen, but we will see, and it certainly will be with its pageantry, its traditions, and its ceremonies on the day.
I mean, just our generation, Peter, has only known Queen Elizabeth II as the monarch, as the sovereign, as the head of state of the United Kingdom. King Charles, you know, for people like ourselves, probably sounds a little bit foreign, but strange, but unexpected, if you will, despite the fact that the late monarch was 96 years old. And you'll remember that she was in her mid-20s when she ascended the throne due to the passing of her father, who became, of course, an unexpected king, right, after the abdication of his brother. So this has had a more formulaic handover, a more formulaic transition, if you will, right? The passing of the monarch, she did not abdicate, she died while on the throne, and of course King Charles immediately assumes the title of sovereign. He becomes King Charles, no longer the Prince of Wales. And here's a little footnote, Peter, Queen Camilla. No one's talking about that, the Queen Consort. That's going to be a refreshing change for the United Kingdom and certainly members of the Commonwealth.
All right. So we've heard from President Biden and other leaders. What about Republicans? Have they been coming to the party and sharing their thoughts?
The only Republican I have on my list here, Peter, is the former President Donald Trump. I have seen some tweets from other elements within the U.S. government, but let me just read you a little bit more detail of what former President Trump said. Melania and I are deeply saddened to learn of the loss of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Together with our family and fellow Americans, we send our sincere condolences to the royal family and the people of the UK during this time of great sorrow and grief. Her historic and remarkable reign left a tremendous legacy of peace and prosperity for Great Britain. The Obamas, we touched on a little bit about what they said. This is some more. Michelle and I were lucky enough to come to know Her Majesty, and she meant a great deal to us. They met her back in 2011, soon after, during his first term. Back when we were just beginning to navigate life as President and First Lady, she welcomed us to the world stage with open arms and extraordinary generosity. Time and again, we were struck by her warmth, the way she put people at ease, and how she brought her considerable humor and charm to moments of great pomp and circumstances. And I think that's another element of the late monarch that many people who have met her and encountered her, and certainly some of the little clips that we get to see from those private moments, she was always ready to crack a joke, to bring some levity into a situation that might have been deemed serious. President Biden, he talked about how she was supported by her beloved Philip for 73 years. Queen Elizabeth led always with grace and unwavering commitment to duty and the incomparable power of her example. In the years ahead, we look forward to continuing a close friendship with the King and the Queen Consort. Today, the thoughts and prayers of the people of the United States are with the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth in their grief. So just a smattering of reaction here, Peter.
So I suppose at British houses of drink and places like that in America, there probably will be some kind of gatherings taking place.
Absolutely. There is a big British expat community here in New York, and one imagines around the country. But I imagine that Brits around the world will be gathering, certainly amongst themselves, inviting friends and close confidants to join them in this moment of real sadness. I think if South Africans are going to compare this to anything, it's probably the passing of former President Nelson Mandela. I remember the day Madiba died. I was walking outside of the United Nations and my phone buzzed, and I turned around immediately and went back inside. Ban Ki-moon was Secretary General at the time, and he was about to leave on an international trip and delayed his departure so that he could come personally and make a statement. We might have seen something similar from Antonio Guterres, but today, given the passing of the Queen. But unfortunately, he was traveling. He's in Pakistan, showing a sense of solidarity after those devastating floods there, Peter. But his spokesperson came out immediately to make that statement on camera, and that really just speaks to the significance of this moment. I don't think any of us will forget where we were when we got the news, right? I mean, we woke up this morning to the breaking news that her doctors were placing her under medical observation, and that's been the running story all day. And I think television programs breaking away from their regular programming tells a story in itself, right? This is a significant moment. It will be remembered by many around the world who lived through it.
If we take the example of other iconic leaders who've died in the past, can we expect something to happen at the United Nations?
Very much so. The death of a head of state is always marked by a special ceremony in the UN General Assembly. We don't have the details of that yet, Peter, early days yet, but that certainly will happen in the weeks ahead. It gives the opportunity for various regional blocs here at the United Nations to pay tribute. We saw that for former President Mandela. We've seen that for other leaders in the UN General Assembly. So as soon as we get those details, we'll certainly share it with you. But certainly the United Nations will mark this with some form of formal tribute in the days or weeks ahead.
All right. And what's been the television and media coverage of her passing been so far?
Yeah, it's been blanket. It's been blanket coverage. Programming has shifted towards a strong focus on what's happening in the United Kingdom. Look, the Justice Department has just announced as well here that they're going to be appealing the ruling by a Florida judge earlier this week, appointing a special master to review the documents, those classified documents that were removed by the FBI from former President Donald Trump's residence in Florida. His former special advisor, Steve Bannon, has been charged with fraud by the Manhattan District Attorney. So those have become footnotes in news coverage here, given the passing of the Queen. But in no time, I'm sure, we'll return to the news of the day in the United States, given that we are just less than 2 months out from an election.
Sherwin, we'll leave it there for the time being, but certainly a story I'm sure that we'll be continuing to give rolling coverage, certainly for the next day or so, right up until at the funeral. Thanks so much indeed for giving us a perspective from the United States.
Thanks, Peter.
All right, that's our correspondent in New York, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. And yeah, former presidents in the United States, and she met many of them in her lifetime, sending their condolences and messages to King Charles III and the royal family and the people of Britain as Queen Elizabeth II passed away earlier this afternoon.